So here's the story of how I found out that wrestling was fake or scripted, whatever the hell you want to call it. I don't know how I found this out, but for whatever reason, I found out that SmackDown was not live. I didn't know that it was taped on Tuesdays. I just assumed that it was live like Raw was. But somehow I stumbled upon an article on a website called eWrestlingNews.com, which is still up and running, ran by Ryan Clark. I do like the guys at eWrestling News. I always enjoyed them. I still check their website periodically. It's my number 2 source of wrestling news, and we're going to get into number 1 in a bit. But for a time, eWrestling News was my number 1 source of wrestling news, and that's how I found out that wrestling was scripted and predetermined. It's how I started learning about the backstage aspects of the wrestling industry. I remember reading about Batista leaving WWE. That's how I found out that it was happening. So I knew Batista was leaving beforehand. So when he quit, I'm like, oh, these guys reported it first. So they actually have some inside information on what goes on in the industry. That's interesting. So I ended up reading SmackDown spoilers, which kind of ruined the whole experience for me, which really ended up becoming a weekly tradition. That's the thing about having shows taped, is that you can just read spoilers online, which is not a good thing. And don't get me wrong, I'm not blaming the websites for posting spoilers. They're doing their job. It's just more me blaming them for taping their shows instead of doing it live, which made me really happy when SmackDown finally went live a little bit over a year ago. But yeah, with all the inside reports about what's going on backstage, about why WWE decided to put the belt on this person and not on that person, and reading spoilers, I was able to kind of connect the dots that there was really more to wrestling than I initially thought. And I was actually pretty upset when I found out that wrestling was scripted and wasn't real. But I eventually got over it, and actually knowing that wrestling was scripted, learning more about the industry actually kind of made me a bit more passionate about the industry than I ever was, just being a casual viewer. But I do remember it was eWrestlingNews.com specifically. That was the first ever wrestling news website that I was exposed to. I don't know how. I don't know why. I guess I just Googled SmackDown, and the results came up, on the news section of Google or something like that. I don't know. But that's how I found out wrestling was fake, from going on these websites, specifically eWrestlingNews.com, and reading these articles, reading articles about the backstage politics and whatnot. But it actually increased my interest of wrestling, and I wanted to learn even more about it. So it actually ended up making me more passionate. You would think that learning that it was fake would make me less passionate, but it actually increased my passion. So